If you're a football player who needs a workout program to make it to the next level, whether you're a high school or college athlete that's a D2, Juco, D3 that doesn't necessarily have a strength and conditioning program that's well built out for yourself to help you get bigger, stronger, faster, and more powerful and have it transfer over to the field, we're going to be breaking down and sharing with you one of our training systems that we have for athletes just like you that need to get stronger and more powerful for your sport. I'm Coach Nick Ladden. I'm a certified strength and conditioning coach, and I am part owner of Athlete Academy, and we're going to dive into this. So we're literally going to leave nothing behind. I'm going to show you all the different phases that we have, how to structure, organize your workouts, the intention behind all of them, sets, reps, all that stuff. So you guys can get a good overview of what this actually looks like so you can implement it for yourself. So let's dive right into it. So I'm going to share my screen right now with you. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is inside of our Elite Athlete Project. Okay, so it's a membership that we have that houses all of our programs from baseball to speed to our bonuses and our Jacked Athlete program. But we're going to look at our Strength and Power phase. So the Strength and Power, or our Strength and Power program, has really three phases. So there's a foundational phase, an absolute strength and power, and an explosive performance phase. So with any training program, we want to start, this is like off season, right? We want to start with a little higher volume, build some base levels of strength, some work capacity, prepare the body to be able to handle the amount of intense training that the following sessions or the following phase is going to have, which is our absolute strength and power. And then we're going to go into more of like a peak power, really trying to get you firing on all cylinders, leading into that season, so you're at your best. So let's take a look at the foundational phase. So this is a 4 times a week program that's split into upper lower splits. This works really nicely if you need to add some speed training in. You can double up on, say, like your upper body days, because there'll be adequate rest for you to be able to do that. So upper body, let's get into upper body day 1. Okay, so we're always going to start out with some dynamic warm-up, dynamic stretching. Like to keep it consistent and the same, even if there's some lower body stuff in there, because most of our athletes tend to be super tight, rigid, and not mobile. And that's one of the area that if we spend some time, we can really start to see some performance increase and help you with your lifts overall as well. So we got our warm-up right here, perfect stretch, lateral lunge, hip flexor, walking RDL, quad stretch just to get the legs going. Okay, then we have a PVC pipe complex, which is more for shoulder mobility, opening up the chest, and kind of getting your shoulders ready and prepared to handle some of the lifts we're about to do. And then we got our primers in here. So this is meant to like help strengthen, provide a little bit more blood flow, get the muscles contracting, which we're going to need to use to help stabilize the body during some of our heavy presses and pulls. So band pull aparts, internal or external, internal band work, the rotation, and then a sensory iso push-up. That is simply to get you to feel. A lot of our athletes tend to struggle with feeling their chest on, say, like a bench press, a dumbbell bench press. So this sensory iso push-up will help you maximally contract your chest so you can start to feel that, right, and bridge that gap, get that, what they call mind-muscle connection, and help get us warm and ready before we go into our heavy works, which are going to be our main lifts, okay? So again, this phase this is like more of the basic stuff that we're getting into, okay? So 3 sets of 8 on bench. This rest, you can go a little bit heavier if you need to, up to 2 minutes, 30 seconds, maybe even 3 if you really need it. And then we're pairing that with some pull-ups. So we're trying to keep these workouts efficient. So even if you wanted to do this, you could superset this as well with that. So bench press, 3 sets of 8, pull-ups, 3 sets of 8. And we get into our accessory work. So real quick, this is a horizontal push, right? Horizontal push, vertical pull. So we're getting those planes of movement, right? Then we're getting a seated military press, which would be a vertical push, hitting our triceps and the lower part of our chest with our dips. Okay. Then we're getting seated neutral grip rows. You can also use like dumbbell rows for this. Okay. This is that horizontal pull. And then we're doing a little bit of hammer curls to get our arms, and then some shoulder work, so lateral and posterior delt with this to round out the rest of the upper body before we get into some stability and core work. Okay, stability, mobility. We progress the Turkish get up throughout from a half Turkish get up. We do another week where it's a little bit higher reps. You can increase the weight, and then we go into a full Turkish get up as a progression to be able to get the athletes to understand what's going on with this. Okay, then we got our rotational work here, some rotational strength with kneeling wood chops, and then single arms, front rack, farmer's march for a lot of core and hip stability, which is really needed for any contact sport athlete. Okay, and that wraps up our upper body day one. So again, the primary focus is building some muscle and building strength with this. Okay, then we'll get into lower body one, or our first lower body work. Okay, so warm-ups all the same, except for the primers. The primers are going to be a little bit different, okay? And then we add in a little bit of hip flexor banded distractions just to help open up the joints a little bit more, so we can get into, say, deeper squats, deeper lunges, and kind of open ourselves up a little bit, okay? And our ankles. A lot of people have poor ankle mobility, so we're trying to help open that up a little bit so we're not rolling onto our toes or anything like that during our squat, okay? Then we do a little bit of hip activation, some hip circle walks, physio ball leg curls to get the hamstrings and glutes tied in together, get them going, and then our oblique opener. So we use the oblique opener as a way to teach our athletes what proper bracing is. Most athletes will just engage the rectus abdominis. We're trying to get the external obliques and lower abs to braces. That's going to provide a lot more stability during, say, a heavy squat or deadlift, okay? And then again, we have some primers or some sensory isos, a deep squat sensory iso. This also serves to help the athletes get into a new, deeper position for that squat. Okay, and then some hip flexor iso holds just to help get a little bit more strength in the hip flexor during this period, kind of wrapping things together. And then getting into barbell back squat. Okay, so barbell back squat, 3 sets of 8, right? The rest, you can probably take it up another minute or so, depending on how you're feeling, okay? With all of this, last 2 to 3 reps should be very, very challenging, and you're trying to do progressive overload as you go through the weeks, okay? Then we're going into barbell RDL, okay? So we always start bilateral, and then we try to move into more unilateral movement. So we're trying to bridge the gap a little bit here with some dumbbell split squats, okay? There's no movement going on. It's stationary, but we are emphasizing more of the lead leg, the front leg, to get more of the work done on those dumbbell split squats, compared to, say, just like a standard squat. And then we'll progress this eventually, I believe, into our second and third phases, like a rear foot elevated or Bulgarian, where we can put more emphasis on that lead leg and get more of the effort coming from that. Because when you have 2 feet versus 1, right, on this, you have something called bilateral deficit, which simply means that the central nervous system shoots a signal down to your muscles, right? And if we're using both legs, it has to, think of it as this, it has to split that signal down to both legs, compared to if it was just one, it could put all that signal down into one leg. And typically, all things being equal, if we are doing a single leg variation, that muscle will be able to produce more force, more strength, more power in a single leg, just because the central nervous drive is happening to one leg rather than both. So say you can back squat 300 pounds as your max effort, you would be able to, again, all things being equal, do say 160, 170 on one leg, and then the other leg, which would bring you to a total of, say, 320 to 340. Okay, so that's all that bilateral deficit means. Okay, so then we're doing a little bit more posterior chain, a physio ball leg curl with a hip bridge. Okay, some goblet lateral squats, working the frontal plane, getting a little bit of core tie-in, having to stabilize here. And then we're finishing off with some plyometrics at the end, because these are just a force absorption, landing mechanics that we're really working here with that. Now, plyometrics will vary depending on what types and where they're at and what methods we're using as we progress through this. Okay, and we use a little bit of the periodization model, where we're going to be increasing the reps, right? So 3 sets of 8, we'll go to 3 sets of 10. believe we touch into 3 sets of 12, and then we start to come back down. So we're building some strength, some muscle, and then we're really going to start to focus into our like max strength and power. Okay, so then we'll go into upper body 2. In warm up, PVC pipe complex. Okay, now our main lifts are going to be slightly different, where it was bench and pull-ups. Okay, now it's the main lift is going to be a bent over row. So it's a horizontal, right? And then previously we had a horizontal push here. This is a horizontal pull, right? And then flip flop, right? Then we have overhead strict press where we had pull-ups. So we're getting both movement planes for pushing and pulling on our main lift. So we're really trying to make this balance so that you're not developing any, I would say, necessarily muscular imbalances. You're going to have muscular imbalances just from the demands of your sport. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but when training, we're trying to keep things similar or equal as much as we can, depending on your sport. Okay. Then we're going to go to incline dumbbell bench. Okay, working a little bit different angle. Okay, hitting a little bit top part of the chest. Incline dumbbell bench, I think, is a little bit better, say for like D-lineman, because typically when you're coming out of a stance and you're coming up, right, your angle, you're coming up, not necessarily straight out all the time. If you're doing it correctly, exploding through the hips, driving through, you're going to be hitting up and right with the pads, right? You're always coming up and through with it. And then we're hitting a different variation and a different angle for our triceps dumbbell overhead tricep extension. They're in the lengthened position. This would be great for adding in slabs of muscle to that tricep. Some cable reverse lat pull downs, think chin up. Right now we're getting a little bit of bicep tie-in with a compound movement. So we're going to get a good amount of contribution coming from the bicep and the lats, and then finishing off with a bicep curl before going into some more accessory work. Again, more posterior delt, hitting a little bit of the traps, okay, with the dumbbell upright row, and then straight arm lat pull downs for a little bit more of the lats that before we go into some stability and core. Okay, so single leg cable RDL cable rows, okay, huge on the hip stability. These are pretty challenging, but they're great. And then reverse crunch, so we get a little bit of the lower abs and hip flexors in here as well with that. Okay, so that's upper body day 2 or upper body 2. And then lower body, again, same warm up. We have a little bit different ab work here to work a little bit of the post or the lateral anti-lateral flexion. With the bands is going to help you to drive the hips through and work your glute medius a little bit more too. Okay, so we're really working everything from the full body with these throughout the workouts. Barbell hip thrust to help us get more of that posterior chain, develop our glutes. Your glutes are your biggest muscle. They're powerhouse. They're where you generate all your power. They're probably the most important thing for football. So we're going to spend some time developing them because they're pretty much underdeveloped for most athletes who are playing. Okay, and then front squats. So now we're not loading the spine as much. We're targeting more of the quads. We can probably get a little bit deeper range of motion with this. Also, that's why we have the PVC pipe complexes and the other day to help open up your shoulders so you can actually get into that front rack position. Okay, some sumo squats. Okay, just to hit the adductors a little bit more, right? Some sumo squats sometimes get a bad rap, or sumo deadlifts and all that. But for us, it's really about opening up the legs a little bit, targeting a little bit different, getting a little bit more contribution from the adductors to help prevent growing injuries. And then a B stance, like I said, we're moving from bilateral to unilateral. So small progression is just doing like a B stance or a kickstand where one foot's in front, one foot's back with your foot. So like 80% to 90% on the lead leg, 10 to 20% on the back leg, just there as a little bit of balance. And then we're working some, again, this is deceleration. This is more landing. So some skater jumps that are going to be in the beginning, more landing focus and being able to decelerate and come out. And then altitude jumps or death jumps where we're just landing, trying to absorb force quickly and get into that position. And then just a little bit more working on the musculature of the legs for some sprinter calf raises. Okay, and then some anterior tibialis raise. The spinner calf raise really targets the soleus. It's the bent knee moving forward. Most people most athletes are a little bit slower because they don't take care of the lower limb from the knee down. So the force transfer is not as great from how much strength and power they have, say in the glutes, quads, and hamstrings, but their lower legs lack, right? The calves, ankles. So we're trying to develop these a little bit to help with your overall force transfer. Okay, so that in a nutshell is the foundational phase. Okay, like I said, the exercises will vary slightly. We'll adapt them and change them as they go on, and same thing with the sets and the reps. But let's move into the actual strength and power phase. Probably one of my favorite phases to actually get into here. So again, this is 4 times a week. We use a conjugate method in this. So conjugate method has been very popularized for power lifting, getting super strong. So we're taking this model and adapting it for our athletes. Okay, we'll use some other things, and I'll explain them, like contrast sets in here. But now we're really going to start to focus and drop the reps down, increase the sets. So we really are getting closer and closer to our true strength numbers and max force output. So again, bench press, the same, 3 sets of 6. This will drop down, eventually be 4 sets of probably 3 to 4, maybe even touch 2s in the later weeks. Okay, so it's our main lift, and these will alternate, right? So with the conjugate method. So the conjugate method, there's more variety in the main strength movements to take away some of fatigue a little bit, as well as help you stay a little bit fresher with that. So bench press, reverse grip, bent over row, again, getting the gluteus, neutral grip, lat pull down, dumbbell flies to get just a little bit more chest in there. Still getting a little bit of muscle hypertrophy, but the reps are a little bit lower. And then hitting our arms and our shoulders and our triceps, okay, with lateral raise, hammer curls, skull crushers. I absolutely hate and love skull crushers all at the same time, right? So max effort again. This means you're pushing the intensity as hard as you can. Okay, we got our hip banded distractions. Okay, barbell back squat, right? So 3 sets of 8. This will again drop down more and more. Barbell hip thrust. Okay, still continuing to develop the glutes. Then this is in here to add a little bit, since we're doing such heavy lifting, this will actually, we're trying to take care of you, right? Like we're trying to make sure things are working correctly. So we'll do some Patrick step ups or some knee health. Okay, some dumbbell Romanian deadlifts, dumbbell side lunge, hanging leg raises. Okay, so there's not as much, besides like the warm up, having a lot of exercise, there's not as much exercise selection because we really want you to push the intensity with this. Okay. And then dynamic effort. Okay. These are like my favorite days. Okay. So now we're going to do a little bit more power work. Okay. So we're focusing on the speed of this. Okay. This is banded pull-ups, but if you're someone who's a little bit stronger, okay, we just have the assistance in there because we want you to go a little faster, right? So if you're someone who is already very strong, you could do normal pull-ups with this as well. Banded bench press. Again, this is like between 40 to 60%, just depending upon of the 1 rep max that's on the bar, depending on the bands that you choose. Then you're adding bands onto this, onto the bench, and you're going for speed, right? You're trying to move that bar as quick as you possibly can. So you're touching your chest and then exploding up. So this is something known as accommodating resistance. Okay, so either bands or chains, whatever you have with you in your gym. Okay, so as the bands stretch, the athlete needs to continue to apply greater and greater force output and acceleration because it gets harder and harder at the top to really maximize that power. Okay, dumbbell snatch, a little bit of legs, but dumbbell snatch does work the upper back as well, and the shoulders as well. That's why that's in there. A little bit of extra power work, a little bit higher velocity movement for the upper back and shoulders with that. Chest supported row, reverse flies. Again, a lot of posterior delt. Got to keep you guys safe. And then we're hitting a little bit more chest work here, and then a little more arms. Okay. And let's go into dynamic effort. Okay, banded deadlift. So like the banded bench, right? Now we're pulling through quickly. We're hitting the posterior chain. You're touching down, pulling up and through. You're trying to be fast. Same thing with banded back squat. Okay. Clean pulls. We're getting so we're starting here with some clean pulls, right? The beginning of a clean. Still a little bit heavier. Clean pulls, you can typically go a little bit heavier to maximize your power output. Say compared to like a hang clean or any of that, where it's a little bit further. We're just working the foundational steps right now. Kettlebell swings, awesome. A lot of posterior chain, quick hips again. Depth to broads, banded skaters, okay, for some plyometrics, and then some lateral quick toss. Okay, the plyometrics are down here because all these are power exercises. Okay, so it will not really take away from your plyometrics. If anything, it should actually like prime you and keep you ready, assuming that your rest is adequate with all of that. Okay, and then I'll just show you. Let me see. Let's do day 3. Okay, so you can see the main lift changes, right? So like this one is push press, power row. Okay, the exercises are going to change throughout week to week for that. So you can see that's our absolute strength and power phase, and we're just getting strong, getting powerful here. Okay, let me show you like the last week here, just so you can kind of see the sets and reps. So you can see, right, 4 sets of 3. These are working sets, right? These are working sets. That means that you don't just choose a lightweight here. Like these need to be heavy, okay? And then we've progressed this from that split dumbbell now into dumbbell walking lunge, where you are going to be unsupported on one leg for a moment in time as you're doing that. So gradual progression from bilateral to unilateral as we move through this. And then let's go to the last phase. So this is where the money's made. This is where it's at. Okay, another 4 times a week training split. Okay, the reason why we set it in this order is to achieve something called phase potentiation. Okay, so that just means that the first phase of training serves as a catalyst and supports the next phase of training, which then supports the next phase of training, so you get better and better results for your goals for that future phase, right? So a lot of athletes will go out there and they'll be changing their workouts all the time. They'll be doing a bunch of like high velocity type stuff, thinking it's getting them super explosive. But if you don't have the strength and foundation to do that stuff, you're going to get suboptimal results from that. I'm not saying you won't get results. You're just not going to get the best amount of results that you could if you developed these strength qualities in order to maximize the amount of power that you're going to produce. Because if we look at power is force times velocity. Force is coming from that strength, right? Velocity is coming from more of that quick type movement with that. So with this, we have some contrast training in here. Okay, so perfect stretch, right? Mobility, kind of go through that again. Primers, right? Barbell split squat, and we're pairing this with a single leg frog jump, which you can look into that. That's like a single leg broad jump, repeat broad jumps. Okay, so this is our vertical up and down. Then we go to horizontal, right? So posterior chain. So barbell hip thrust again with some double bounds or box broad jumps, depending on where you're at. So 10 yards, you're trying to do like three reps. Hopefully, you don't need to do 4 with that. Okay. B stance RDL, bent knee side plank for some more accessory work, side lunge, banded skater rolls, lateral to box jump. Okay, so that is our lower contrast training. Contrast training means that you're just taking a heavy load and then you're pairing it with a plyometric or unresisted type of movement to take advantage of something called post-activation potentiation. So you stimulate the body, your body thinks, oh shoot, I need to produce this amount of force, this amount of power, and then you go into that plyometric and then you have a better performance. You produce power at a greater level to improve that specific aspect over and over and over again. Okay, then we have upper contrast training with some mobility. Okay, same principles. We kind of prime ourselves. We have another movement in here with that. Banded complex, half kneeling chest pass. Okay, so that's like with a med ball. Power row, single arm dumbbell row. So the reps are super low. Single arm kettlebells press, farmer's march, full Turkish get up, kettlebell windmill for the lateral plane or the frontal plane as you come over to the side, your QL. That one's great for, running backs, honestly, every athlete, D linemen who need to get around the edge. It's a great overall movement that more people need to be doing. Okay, then we have lower body power and velocity training here. Okay, so perfect stretch, mobility, primers, trap bar deadlifts. Okay, we're using French contrast training here. Okay, so you might have heard about this, but French contrast training is a little bit more of an advanced method, which is why we hold off to use it into our third phase of programming, because now we've built the foundation and built the body's ability to be able to handle this. This is very demanding on the central nervous system. So essentially what we're doing is we're working through the force velocity curve here, where it's maximal strength, then it's into a plyometric. So we're trying to maximize the power aspect or the speed strength aspect. Then we go into a resisted plyometric. So now we're on the strength, speed, power portion of the force velocity curve, and then into an overspeed or high velocity movement, which would be these banded assisted vertical jumps. So trap bar jumps, seated rocker, box jumps. Again, all of these have the videos in them for you to do. And typically with French contrast training, it's a small rest period, anywhere from 15 up to 30, maybe 45 seconds tops. We like to keep it a little bit shorter, and that's to help you take advantage of what I stated earlier, which is the post-activation potentiation. Okay, so we're keeping that activation high so you can produce greater and greater amounts of power and force as you go through this. Okay, so then you rest at the end, right? Then you can rest 2-3 minutes here, recover completely, and then get into the next one. So this is more vertical for this one. Then we get in our Bulgarians, okay, some split squat or kettlebell swings, posterior chain, and then we finish off with some plyometrics, okay? You should not come out of these workouts feeling like it just like kicked you in the ass. Like you should feel pretty good coming out of this workout. Like you want to get a little bit more. Okay, then we have upper power and velocity again. So some banded iso row holds to work our shoulder girdle, push press, clap push-ups, slamline squat to press, banded explosive push-ups in this. These change as well slightly depending on the week. Okay, same principles. And then we have some back, lats, and accessories. So again, the hanging high pull, we're getting that upright row. Again, it's still a lower body movement, but we are getting some contribution of force coming from the back, which is why it's in here, to get a little bit more power work out of this. And then we go into bent over rows, neutral grip pulls, land bind, and then we hit our core, right? So we hit different aspects of our core. So rotational piece right here. That is how we structure and how I would recommend that you structure your training as